Welcome back, Real fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with.
Zach Moreth.
Today, we're here to talk a little bit about a sad weekend in Ole Miss football. It was tough when I was in the stands, so we'll talk a little bit more about that game and kind of just our thoughts about what happened in that game. Some bright spots in that game as well, and then moving on to a bye week for Ole Miss football, much needed bye week for Ole Miss football. For the sake of the fans and just for the sake of the program right now. Some injuries that need to be nursed a little bit, and obviously we'll get more into what some changes that can be made in the future for this Ole Miss football team. But I wanted to talk a little bit about basketball to start off with, Zach. Preseason rankings for both women's and men's came out just yesterday and the day before yesterday. Men's are ranked 24th in the country. I believe it's the first preseason ranking for them since 1997-1998 season. And the women's team is ranked in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1995, I believe. And last year, I think they were ranked 12th to open the season. This year, they're ranked 20th. Talked about it a little bit before the podcast. I think the women's team is a little slept on so far to start the year. They bring a lot of people back for Team 50. Obviously, we know what Coach Yo has been able to do in the playoffs these past couple of years, and especially down the stretch of the seasons. It doesn't seem like these Ole Miss women's basketball teams get off the hot starts, really. It seems like they kind of catch fire late in the year. And if Coach Yo can get this team off to a hot start, and they obviously do what they usually do late in the year down the stretch, this could be a very dangerous team. And then obviously the men's team being ranked 24th to start the year, Chris Beard kind of just rebuilt this team from the bottom again, brought back a lot of guys that he kind of needed, especially with Matthew Moreth, a guy you didn't really expect to get back. You got him back. And then obviously they released a starting lineup today, or a projected starting lineup today for Ole Miss basketball. Sean Padula, Matthew Morrell, Dre Davis, Jamin Brakefield, and Malik Dia. Just what's your thoughts on those as a whole, Zach?
Yeah, I'm a fan of the starting lineup for basketball. Again, I think the addition of Matt Morrell was crucial because if you didn't get Morrell, you kind of needed a guy exactly like him from the portal, and there weren't many of those lingering around. So yeah, you have a leader, a guy who can make shots. I believe Morrell's 6'4", so he can kind of do it all, and also a great rebounder on last year's team, which really struggled with that. I also am curious to see what happens with John Bull. He's probably not going to start again. He is a freshman, but he is the tallest player on the team. Again, Malik Dia is 6'10", I believe. So kind of a small ball type lineup, but you have a lot of forwards who are able to score and, more importantly, rebound the basketball, which was lacking the entire year. But I think it speaks to Keith Carter just to show that how good the stages of these programs are at right now. You know, Keith's a basketball guy. It's something that he wanted to make a priority of, and he's absolutely done that. And I think the sky's the limit for both teams this year. So I'm excited. And if Ole Miss football keeps going down this dark path, I think people are going to turn the page to basketball even quicker. So we'll see.
Absolutely. And obviously men's basketball being ranked 24th, got a lot of SEC teams in front of them in the
Yeah.
rankings as well. So they're projected ninth in the finishing projected order of finish to start the year from the media polls. Got a lot of people in front of them, teams in front of them: Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Florida, Texas, and Kentucky. A lot of teams that are going to be some good basketball teams this year. Yet to see what this Ole Miss team looks like this year as a whole on the floor. Well, we'll get to see that in the exhibition game, I believe, on the 27th against Illinois. It'll be in Oxford, so I'm
Yeah.
sure some fans will be out to see that, watch some beard ball for the first time in 2024. We talked about it a little bit before the podcast with the women's team. Just kind of seemed like a little bit of slept on there. You're returning three critical players in KK Deans, who didn't really get to play much last year, and obviously Madison Scott and Kennedy Ty Williams. I think really just off of Toddy and Madison Scott, you bring back two elite players, two elite ball handlers on your team, and then KK Deans, who was supposed to be your primary ball handler last year, and you get her back this year. I think this women's team right now for Coach Yo could be one of the teams with the most potential I've seen in recent years with Coach Yo and the women's hoops. And obviously last year starting 12th, you had high expectations last year, but I believe this is a team that can put it all together.
Yeah, Cam, I kind of threw the analogy of it's giving off a similar vibe of, how Ole Miss football was able to retain a lot of these key players. That's what Coach Yo did. She did a great job in the portal as well. So again, I think sky's the limit, really, especially with the leadership on this team. and it should make for a really exciting winter and something that we haven't seen between both programs in a very long time at Ole Miss.
Absolutely. Got exhibition games coming up for both women's and men's basketball late in October. So college basketball right around the corner for Ole Miss hoops. Obviously, saw football getting deep into the season here. We'll shift to that now. Coming off a loss going into the bye week for Ole Miss, 26-29 loss in overtime. It was a tough one. I was in the stands in Baton Rouge with my dad, big LSU fan, and a couple of my buddies.
Yeah,
It was a tough loss. It was a game where if you're watching that game as an Ole Miss fan, or even just as even as just a football watcher, it just seemed like even though Ole Miss had control of the game the whole game, it seemed like everything was kind of going wrong for Ole Miss in certain situations. It seemed like the offensive line just couldn't really pick up blocks on the defensive line or any blitzers coming through for LSU. It seemed like at times the Ole Miss offense couldn't catch a break, whether it be penalties or just drop passes or just bad decision making. Anyway, there's several places you could blame here for that loss, but it just seemed like at some points, like I said, this team really never had control of the game, even though they were in the lead.
that's the thing, Cam. Me myself included, everyone was holding on to this sense of hope throughout the whole game because Ole Miss was able to keep a lead. But as you entered those stages of the third and fourth quarter, Ole Miss isn't scoring touchdowns. LSU's kicking another field goal, another field goal, another field goal. And finally, it fell apart. It tied the game, went into overtime. Shout out to Caden Davis for redeeming himself. And I think he nailed a career high 57
It's
yarder.
57, yeah.
But then again, shout out to the LSU scheme. They did what they were doing all day long. They were motioning their backs usually into the slot or out wide. And when they motion them out wide, then you have a linebacker trying to guard a wide receiver. And it worked. It worked really well. And then on the last play of the game, they motioned Lacey across the field to give him a matchup with a smaller defensive back in Jaden Kennedy. And one-on-one ball, Lacey catches that 10 out of 10 times. And that's exactly what happened. So credit to LSU. But again, the missed opportunities, it was hard for me to go back and watch the highlights of this game, Cam. One of the main things for me is Jackson Dart looks a little one-dimensional, and it's not a knock to Dart. He's so tough. He had a couple good runs at the end of the game there. He had a beautiful ball in the first drive to Trey Harris. It should have been a touchdown. But it feels like he's not exactly going through his progressions and almost force feeding the person he has in mind. So, for example, when Trey Harris is in the game, it's all about Trey Harris. Now Trey Harris is out of the game. Caden Lee starts to kind of fill in that role. And I know Lee had a great game. So if it's working, fine. But here's a statistical error from my perspective. Caden Lee, again, he had a great game. He had more receptions than Jordan Watkins, Caden Prieskorn, Daquan Wright, and Juice Wells combined. That can't happen in a high caliber game that you're trying to win in Death Valley. And again, there's got to be a way to get Caden Prieskorn the ball and Juice Wells. I'm not an offensive genius like Lane Kiffin is, and I've seen him maneuver these types of things. So that's what makes it extremely frustrating. But again, it's not a knock to Caden Lee. He had a great game. I just want to see Dart kind of spread the ball out a little more and get the ball into these hands of these players who either came back or transferred here expecting to boost their NFL draft stock. And then, Cam, you can dive into this a little bit, but Ulysses Bentley, all I got to say is shout out to him. He has earned the starting running back spot. There's no doubt in my mind.
Absolutely. Bentley, 11 carries, 107 yards, and a touchdown. Obviously broke off the big run on fourth down there. I believe it was 4th and 2, 4th and 3. Ole Miss kind of just needed that first down to just kind of really just drain the clock and keep that possession going. And Bentley just took it to the house. Obviously, sigh of relief from Ole Miss fans, sigh of relief from the sideline for Ole Miss. And then you could see the energy from Bentley after that touchdown. But even after the touchdown, obviously Bentley was in the game a little bit more. He had some more other runs. He was averaging 9 yards a carry. But obviously, Parrish was starting that game. He gets more carries. But just at some point, I think you have to lean on Bentley more in that game, especially after the 50-yard run. And then I don't know if anyone else noticed, but it seemed like every time Bentley had the ball, he was falling forward. And I think that's a key when you play running back in the SEC. No matter how big you are, you fall forward, not go backwards, because even 3 to 4 yards a carry is better than anything else. Obviously, Parrish being a smaller guy, Bentley also a smaller guy, but Parrish we know is a smaller guy. But it just, like I said, it seemed like at times Bentley was the more reliable option to go with. Obviously, Jackson Dart had 15 carries as well. A lot of those were him just trying to escape the pocket.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk a little bit more about that. It seemed like just Dart really never had much time. And compared to the guy on the other side of the field, Garrett Nussmeier, who's had pretty much all day to throw the football, it seemed like at times he was just standing back there, just waiting for a receiver to get open. And I think that kind of what he did most of the game, even though you could blame it. You can blame the Ole Miss defense for not covering, but it seemed like at times the Ole Miss secondary did all they could until they couldn't when Garrett Nussmeier just finally found somebody that got open. But as far as going back to the pass rush for Ole Miss for LSU this past weekend, some notable things there that TJ Oxley, shout out TJ Oxley of the Rebel Walk, pointed out after the game. Jackson Dart was pressured on 21 of his drop back snaps against LSU. He's been pressured 70 times this year. It's the second most in the SEC, and that's 28% of his dropbacks. Jackson Dart is not the greatest under pressure. No knock on Dart. No one's that great under pressure. I mean, especially being pressured that many times a game. You got guys who thrive under it. I believe TJ pointed that out as well. You got guys like Shadur Sanders, Kate Klubenik, Drew Aller, who seem to kind of thrive under being pressured a little bit, seem to make those throws when they have a guy in their face. And then you have guys like Carson Beck, who's 55, has a PFF grade of 55 on 43 pressures this year. You got a guy like Will Howard, been pressured 31 times, 32.2 grade on that this year. And then Nico from Tennessee, he has a 29.8 grade on pressured snaps. So a lot of these guys just aren't that, like, it's just stats, man. If you're pressured on majority of your snaps, it's not going to be great. This Ole Miss offense is kind of centered based off getting the ball out quick. And if Dart is pressured, when he's not getting the ball out quick, it doesn't seem like it's a great result for Ole Miss.
No, it's bad. And again, the offensive line, it's got to adjust. It has to adapt somehow. Lane Kiffin said Jaden Williams may be coming back for Oklahoma. If he's not back for Oklahoma, I would expect him back starting at left tackle against Arkansas, just based on the way Kiffin's talking about him. And I also might expect to see Jeremy James in the mix at one of the tackle spots because both tackles had a really long day, a lot of holding calls. And again, it felt like Jackson Dart was moving around in the backfield every single play when he didn't get that initial first read to the open receiver. My next topic here, Cam, is Juice Wells. Juice Wells, 2 years ago, playing at South Carolina, is an all-SEC wide receiver. He has 100-yard games against, let me see here, 8th-ranked Clemson and 5th-ranked Tennessee. And before he got injured last year, his final game against Georgia, he caught 2 passes for 35 yards and a touchdown. Again, this is against Georgia. I don't understand how he doesn't get the ball more when Trey Harris is not in the game. And again, I don't think Juice Wells is a guy who you can run go routes with every time and try and find him 30, 40 yards down the field. He's a guy who needs to get the ball quick, get the ball in space, because he can make a man miss. He's not this big home run type guy, even though he can be. More of his bag is moving him around and using his versatility, his strength, and his speed. And we haven't seen that. And an all-SEC wide receiver who gets 0 catches against LSU, it doesn't make sense to me. So I really hope they can start to utilize him. And again, his draft stock, it's plummeted a lot because he doesn't really get the ball. So I'm hoping Juice can incorporate himself a little bit more. Hopefully Lane can get him going in the offense, but you have to spread the ball around. Again, I'm not the coach. I don't know what they see, but from the fan perspective, it's not right that Juice Wells, Caden Prieskorn, and Jordan Watkins are barely getting targets and barely making any catches too. I think something has to change, and you're going to get tested again in a couple weeks. Oklahoma has a very solid defense, so we're going to find out really quickly, what adjustments have been made or what haven't.
Absolutely. And I remember saying before the year started when we were kind of evaluating some of these players, and I remember I might have said it on a podcast talking about Juice Wells, saying he's the type of guy like A.J. Brown. You give him the ball in space, you let him do his work, you let him take one to the house, you let him break a couple tackles. And we haven't really done that much this year with Juice Wells. It seemed like, like you said, it seemed like Juice Wells most of the time is running the deeper routes. And I know you got guys like Trey Harris, like Caden Lee running the screen routes a lot. But when you have a guy of Juice Wells' caliber who's able to take a ball like from a bubble route to the house, why not throw him the football in space? We talked about it before on Monday when I was in the press conference with you, Zach, and we were talking. I was showing you the picture of Prieskorn just 10 yards off the ball in that 1st and 25 in overtime, and obviously Jackson Dart takes a shot. Could have thrown the Prieskorn here, got 15 yards. Obviously, no knock on Dart there. You don't see everything in the heat of the moment, especially in an overtime game where all the pressure is on you as a quarterback. But it seems like at times, like we said before, Ole Miss is kind of taking shots when they don't need to on 1st down, on 2nd down and long. When really just all you need is a check down route to a guy who's wide open, like Caden Prieskorn, 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, who's a big enough guy where he's probably going to fall forward for at least another 5,
Yes.
or it's going to take a couple guys to tackle him. We see Trey Harris do it all the time, and he's a lot smaller than Caden
Yep.
Prieskorn. So when it comes to the play calling, Kiffin was asked about that as well. Didn't really comment much about that. Obviously, he said they look at everything going into the bye week. It seemed like mainly it was just the injuries, and obviously looking at the offensive line up front with people coming back. But with the offensive weapons, it seems like you said, it's more of one dimensional, and you're forcing it to some guys at times. Obviously, Juice Wells had 10 targets in that South Carolina game. I think that's the season high for him. Not really sure off the top of my head how many targets he had in that LSU game, but obviously didn't have a catch. Had a couple of targets I know late in the game, obviously when Trey Harris was out, but it seemed like it was just one dimensional again, but this time with Caden Lee.
Yeah, Cam. And staying on the topic of the play calling, I think the play that's going to haunt me the most is in the first quarter. Ole Miss gets that crazy interception. Hoop Hall tips it to Jamarius Brown, and we're in the red zone. It's time. Trey Harris just missed the catch. We missed the field goal. It's time to go get some points on the board. And again, I'm not a coach, but I don't think Henry Parrish should run the ball 4 times in a row. When it's 4th and 1, Parrish probably doesn't have a breath of fresh air. He's probably a little tired from getting thrown around for the past 3 plays. And you have J.J. Pegues, a guy who hasn't failed converting a first down all year, ready to go on the sideline. And they snap it to Parrish, and what happens? The play gets blown up. They had Jordan Watkins trying to guard a defensive end. That's not good. That's not good. And if you want to win on the road in the SEC, you're going to have to put points on the board when you're in the red zone, and you're going to have to convert on some of those plays. And Ole Miss just didn't. It was eventually leading up to come back to bite them, and it did. The LSU had that incredible drive to tie it and then eventually win the game. But between the drop passes, the penalties, the missed field goals, the turnover on downs, all these things were leading up, and it cost us big, and it's disappointing. But again, bye week. Let's try and rest, recover. And Oklahoma, this game's going to be telling, Cam.
Absolutely. Zach and I could talk all night about this loss for Ole Miss. Just like after the Kentucky loss, we had a lot to say that we really shouldn't say. That we should just kind of keep our mouth shut as fans and reporters. But like Zach said, going into the bye week, a very much needed bye week for Ole Miss. Some big matchups in college football to keep an eye out for. Ole Miss ranked 18 in the newest rankings right now. Obviously, college football playoff rankings will be coming out sometime next month, I believe, or maybe the end of this month. I think in November, when they start to come out. So some critical games down the stretch here. This coming up week, we got Tennessee and Alabama. It's going to be in Knoxville. That's a big game as far as ranking goes, and as far as SEC standings goes. Another huge game for the top of the SEC in Texas and Georgia. Kentucky and Florida are going to match up in the SEC as well. LSU and Arkansas in Arkansas. I'd like to keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah.
Arkansas upset Tennessee a couple weeks ago. In Tennessee, in Arkansas, they got LSU top 10 team coming back to Arkansas. So it seems that's a rivalry game too. I believe they have that for the Golden Boot as well. So, and then Mississippi State will host Texas A&M, 14th ranked Texas A&M. Obviously, Mississippi State, not the greatest year for them so far, but a chance to upset a ranked opponent in Starkville, tough place to play in Starkville, middle of the season. So a good slate of college football this week. Oklahoma will be taking on South Carolina, a team that Ole Miss has played. So a good game for Ole Miss as a program to watch there and kind of just evaluate Oklahoma. I believe Kiffin said it on Monday. It's the first time in program history, I believe, that these two teams are matching up, obviously matched up in some other sports. but first time in program history for football they'll be matching up. So it should be an exciting weekend in a couple of weeks when Ole Miss finally has another home game for the first time in about a month. So
which is
should be
crazy.
should be a crazy weekend that weekend when the Ole Miss fans finally get to come back out and socialize with each other after a tough loss in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, fans. I mean, take your time this weekend. Watch some college football. Don't stress. Have fun doing it, and let's get ready to get back on this train of madness. It seems, and hopefully win a few more games here. And again, you don't know what happens in college football, so I wouldn't say lose every ounce of hope. This is a very good football team. They have all the talent in the world. It's just how we have to mesh that together to eventually win out, because that seems to be the only road to the college football playoffs, unless a miracle happens. So try and relax this weekend, and we'll get back to business in the Grove on October 26th.
Absolutely. That's all we got for you guys today. Make sure to stay tuned to the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.